think he had in the neighborhood of 60 men. Very late at night, and the men just let him go to sleep, and they fed their horses and went to bed. Most of them fell into haystacks and in the barn and outside the barn and whatnot. Mosby himself and some of his officers, young officers, fell asleep in front of the hearth in the house. One of his men, Dick Moran, spent the night with some friends, about a quarter mile down the road. Very early the next morning, as dawn was breaking, a patrol of about 140 cavalry from the 1st Vermont Cavalry came trotting down the road. Someone had tipped him off that if you want to bag Mosby, he's going to be at Missile Farm. Very easy to get it. Now the Federals came trotting down the road, and this woke up Dick Moran. Moran looks outside and he sees all these blue coats riding past, and he knows that they're heading for Mosby. He runs out the back door, jumps on his horse, and heads at a 45-degree angle toward Mosby, screaming, "Get up, the Yankees are coming, get up, get up!" Mosby is instantly up in the yard. His men are stirring, looking for some leadership here. And he's saying, "Hold, boys, hold steady, hold steady. The Yankees are coming, don't run, stay with me." One of his men, Harry Hatcher, comes out of the barn with a horse. He grabs his chief, pulls him up behind him, and jumps off so Mosby can have the horse. The Yankees split into two groups. One group stays outside the fence along the border, expecting anybody from Mosby's group is going to try to run and get over the fence and get away. The other group comes into the yard, down this long, if you can imagine, a long road down into the barnyard. And what happened next is something I will never understand. They lock themselves into the barnyard. They actually close the gate that gets them into the barnyard. They close the gate. The Yankees, of course, are armed with sabers. Mosby's men, sabers and single-shot carbines. Mosby's men, again, are armed with Colts. These men get trapped, and Mosby's men come out, guns blazing. The Federals, of course, a sword is nothing against a Colt. A carbine, you fire it one time, and then all you've got is a baseball bat. So there was this mass of humanity, literally a ball of humanity, just rammed up against this fence. They were just fighting and kicking and screaming and shooting each other and stabbing each other. And this ball of humanity, just this whole, like 40 men, is wound up in this corner up against the fence. And the fence gives from all the weight. And these men are like cockroaches, just running for their lives. I'm sorry. I shouldn't say that about Yankees, but I'm in the South. It's good to be home. Anyway, they run like cockroaches. And Mosby's men end up capturing like 90 horses and 70 prisoners and killed 30 of them. And Mosby lost just 4 or 5 men. I think it was just very, very small, very slight. Just an incredible. This kind of thing happened frequently, which is kind of what adds to Mosby's myth. How in the world did a small force of 60 men, who were completely surprised by a group double their size, or even triple their size, how can they turn the tables on these guys and win? You have to understand, and something I did mention to you earlier, is that Mosby believed that the cavalry saber was obsolete, and that a cavalry saber was a romantic weapon that had no value in modern warfare. He preferred a pair of Colts, a pair of 6-shooters. And for the kind of fighting he did, which was close, jump in, jump out, surprise, get out, that's the perfect weapon for him. And by the way, his men were expected to bring their own horse and their own weapon. But most of them had at least 2 Colts. Many of them got their Colts from the Yankees, and their boots and horses and just about everything else. But his men would have a pair of Colts on their hips. Many of them had these little things that would go over the horse's neck. And the holsters that would go on, a pair of holsters would go on the horse's neck. Some would even carry a Colt or a pistol down in their boot, or maybe an axe, something like that for very close fighting, a big knife, bowie knife. I also have to tell you that most of Mosby's men were not what we would call men, but they were kids, as young as 14. Mosby himself was 29 when the war began, and he was 33 when it ended, not some old fossil like Robert E. Lee. And his men, if you want to call them that, were 16, 17, 18-year-old young fellas who had not heard the song of the bullet. They had not experienced death. They were not afraid of death. They were out for an adventure, romance, and this life of the cavalry where they didn't have to live like other cavalrymen. They were called featherbed guerrillas. And, you know, the Partisan Ranger Act that was created in 1862, which is also based on the naval laws of the time, where if you capture a ship on the high seas, what do you do with the cannons? What do you do with the ship? What do you do with the chronometer? What do you do with the sailors? What do you do with the stores? So, in other words, they could keep everything they got. And while a regular line cavalryman was paid $12 a month and had to provide his own horse, these guys were out stealing, you know, from the Yankees. They were the best mounted, best equipped, best fed cavalry in the entire Confederate Army. It was a very dangerous life, as Mosby said, but it wasn't for everybody, but it was a life of adventure, and a lot of sadness. A lot of them died. But nonetheless, it was an incredible experience for most of these guys. The next one I want to talk about is a fight that was called Brakewood Farm. And this was in May of 63, May 30th, 1863. Mosby had borrowed a cannon. This was a little sucker that was called a mountain howitzer, a little thing that fired a ball about this big.